All right. Thanks for saying hello, everybody. Hello, everyone joining us today. Today, we are here to discuss dealing with and documenting our recent unemployment frauds. As you can see on Jim's screen, a CU-based alert issued about unemployment fraud scams, what's happening within our communities. With that recent spike, how important it is to begin to record and review these events appropriately using some of the CU-based tools. I am Julie Gessner. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at CU Answers Management Services. Today, I'm going to help moderate the sessions. There's over 92 participants that have joined us. That is so awesome, and thank you for giving time out of your day to do that. We're going to go ahead and have conversation via chat. So any conversation that you have relative to the subject or questions that you have for Jim and Keegan can be asked during the chat. I'll try to catch as many of those questions as I can and moderate reviewing those questions out loud to Jim and to Keegan, and we can get the conversation started. Again, we're joined by Jim Vilker, the Vice President of Professional Services. Give us a wave, Jim. He is with Audit Link. And Keegan Daniel, the Vice President of Professional Services with Esris Intelligence and Earnings Edge. So awesome experts that are joining us today. We'll be discussing the importance for your management teams to evaluate potential concerns, reputation risk, and how these activities might have an effect on your financial institution. And they're also going to be demonstrating some CU-based fraud tools and best practices related to investigating these occurrences. They're pretty cool tools. They are very excited to begin showing these to you. So I'm going to hand it on over to Jim and to Keegan.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Keegan and I wanted to keep this as informal as possible as we're reviewing it. Just a few facts. Audit Link, the team here, we're doing daily BSA monitoring for over 100 credit unions, and we kind of serve as the bellwether for the QSO. When you think of it, if somebody's going to see a large growing amount of fraud, we're probably going to get our hands on it first, and we're going to see a very diverse group of fraudsters hitting us. As of this morning, or as of last Friday, we had already uncovered $128,000, majority of which were coming through Massachusetts and Washington State, but are now starting to trickle in through Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. And 5 minutes before this started, we caught another $26,000. So this is an ongoing event in Marvin and I and my team's life on reaching out. I'm going to get into a little bit more of what we see after Keegan, who has been deep in the data as it relates to all of this. And definitely I'm going to have Keegan show you the different fraud tools, because it's our contention we need to start documenting this someplace. CFOs need to be able to push a button, or a CEO needs to push a button, or a chief risk officer needs to push a button to say how much went through, how much did we catch, how much did we not catch. This isn't stopping anytime soon. From what I can see right now, there's over 35 states that are involved. If you have not seen this alert, please reach out to Laura's team, the client service team. They can make sure that you get on the alerts, because these are updated almost daily now. And we've been adding a lot more as we go. The other thing is what we're telling you is these are what other organizations are reporting that states have, but these are the ones that we're actually catching. So what I ask everybody in the network is to say, if you see one that's not on this list, reach out to Audit Link so we can disseminate that to the remaining QSO credit unions. So please, if take a look at this if you haven't seen them. And I don't know of one credit union right now that hasn't seen at least one or two. I literally don't. We're on the phone all day with credit unions. What should I do? We're going to talk a little bit about what you should do after Keegan dives into the software to show how we should document it. So with that said, Keegan, I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to you.
Sounds good. One thing I do want to mention real quick is that the heading of the alert that Jim had just took a look at with us that talked about Washington as being the state for the unemployment agency. I want to be very clear that as you read down further in the alert, there are other company IDs in other states that have been factored into this equation. So that heading, although we started, I think, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, with the state of Washington as kind of being the first item on our radar, it has trickled out to many other states throughout the country. Would you agree with that?
I would completely agree. I think that if you read through the entire alert, I think you're going to see over 30 states with the company IDs for over 30 states. And that's kind of, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Keegan, because that's kind of important because you had a lot of early adopters who got the queries from you and things like that. But what you had stated was you can get the query, but keep your eye on that alert because you're going to need to continuously increase the number of company IDs found within the body of that query, correct?
That is correct. So a couple of things I'll mention for the group here. The Asterix intelligence team has developed a couple of queries to help you identify this information. I'm not going to go in to show actual real member data, but the two queries that we created are one that reviews information in your warehouse. So when I talk about information in your warehouse, I am talking about ACH records that have been received that have yet to be posted to members. If you come into this query, all that you would need to do is go into the Choose Records section, and you're able to see all of the company IDs that have been configured. By the time, if you've requested that we drop this query into your query library so that you have the ability to review that information, please be aware that we are not going back in and adding any of the new company IDs as Jim had mentioned. So I would need to page down here. I would need to say, or I would put in my next company ID, and then I put in my information. So all I need to do is copy this exact same logic with an or statement to ensure that we are including that next company ID. So this particular query, the WHACH100, if you happen to have it in your query library, just would strongly encourage you guys to take a look at those particular company IDs to make sure that we have all of the information that is necessary. Again, this is only looking at the warehouse. So we're looking at warehouse data to determine, do I have any potential for any information that may be suspicious in any sense of the imagination. So the fields that you'll find in that particular query are going to be all the ACH details, the ACH member name, depositor ID, company ID, etc. So strongly encourage you to take a look at that query if you don't already have it. The second query that we created was designed to provide you with information about items that have already posted. Now, the reason why this element is important is because not everything is going to hit your warehouse. And I'm sure Jim might have a few 2 pennies or some 2 cents to throw in here. But when you convert to CU based, one of the things that we work on with you is what we call ACH translations. That is where we work with your team that has been designated at that time to define how we interpret the depositor ID that we are receiving from the Fed. So that depositor ID or the account number that we are receiving in the files for your ACH files is what we read to try to correlate that to a member account number. Every credit union is custom. So I couldn't say that every single time we're looking for 12 digits, 9 digits for the account base, 3 digits for the suffix. More than likely, somebody on your team does know what your ACH translations are. If you do not happen to know what they are, feel free to reach out to us and work with our programming team to get that information. But what this query is doing, to kind of circle back, is really to identify the company IDs. Again, if you need to add them, very similar approach here, where you have all of the company IDs listed. But what this query does is it looks at the last 60 days worth of detail. Now, the reason why it's looking at the last 60 days is that is what we store online in the database for the addenda data that is available. So the ACH addenda data is really the focus of what's listed here. But we also bring in the ACH member name, which is the name of the individual on the ACH record that the originating party had used, as well as the member's name on that account. That is the primary's member's name. So it gives you a quick comparison to see what that ACH member name is and what that primary member's name is as well. Now, the reason why we brought in both of those names is that we saw a lot of name mismatches, didn't we, Jim?
Yeah, that's exactly how my team is picking up on it.
But correct me if I'm wrong, if we talk about NACHA rules or ACH rules in general, tell me how the name comes into play for NACHA rules.
It doesn't. NACHA
Precisely.
rules doesn't want you playing with the name. They want you to post by account number.
So a very important point to make, wouldn't you say, Jim?
It is because we, and Keegan and I have both been having conversations with credit unions on, is there a potential to have a name mismatch report, which from a data analytics standpoint is quite a feat, not impossible, but quite a feat, and not something that could get turned around anytime soon. But, you know, they really, the minute that you start looking at name and you go, oh, that ACH doesn't belong to that individual, I don't think this needs to go on past this fraud period. But you're gonna have to be very careful about that. Returning ACHs because the name on it is not correct. I don't even know if you should be doing it, but every credit union, all 99 of you are at this point in time. The other thing I wanted to mention, Keegan, is that query, you know, obviously the largest run is going to be the one that you do in the morning from the night file, but there are numerous files that are posted during the day. So Keegan, I think you recommended that credit unions are running it not just once, but more than once, correct? Throughout
Yeah,
the day.
absolutely. For those of you credit unions who do not know, you control when your ACH is posted. So within Tool 113, the ACH posting controls configuration, and I do happen to be in our Bedrock credit union here, by the way. So the ACH posting controls here actually guide in the 4 operational runs that the CU Answers operations team is running each day. What do you do at that particular time? Most credit unions are posting credits throughout the day, and then in the 4th run, posting any credits and debits. This that you see on the screen is going to be the most stereotypical configuration that we see for all credit unions. But it is customizable, so depending upon your preferences, you do have the ability to make changes here. I am by no means is Jim or I suggesting you make any changes here, but it might be interesting for you to review what exactly your configuration is so that you can arm yourself with the intelligence to understand how the information is available for you. I do want to pause real quick. It does, there's a ton of comments related to getting those queries. We'll follow up with each one of you individually to send you that information for the queries, and we will take a look at the information with you accordingly. Julie or Jim, I'm hoping one of you can save the comments from the chat here so that we can follow up with each individual.
Certainly. Keegan and Jim, there was a few questions I want to go back to. So if you can take us back to maybe the beginning and talk a little bit more about the queries. It sounded like there was a 2-step process. Can you clarify for the group that process? What should they be looking for to identify this fraud?
Jim,
you want to take that one?
Well, within the body of the queries itself, really what you're looking at is member name versus the name on the ACH on the query that you're running. Now, I say they're never the same. That's not the case. These people are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and they're picking Vilker at the credit union because there was a Vilker unemployment fraud that they got money in on, but my first name wasn't correct, and that first name was not on the account either. So what you're looking at is the mismatches, and when you're finding those, you're looking at the state. You know, well, it's Michigan, and why would Jim Vilker be getting an ACH in the name of Keegan Daniel from the state of Washington? So that's really, you know, at that point, that's when you need to start to dig in to say, it doesn't look right.
So you really need to play investigator.
Yeah, you really do.
And I 100% agree with that. I'll throw out one other element that I had added in the query that I thought may be beneficial is going to be the state where the primary member's address is. I'm not saying that it's possible that a member perhaps applied for unemployment in one state and lives in another. We all know that we have consumers and citizens that might cross state lines for employment reasons or otherwise, but this is one of those, does it pass the sniff test criteria? If the member state is Michigan and they're receiving it from Washington and the name mismatches, that's me down the path that I might want to find a little bit more about that situation.
Now, the other thing is we all, and I've had some interesting conversations with CFOs since this all started back in, well, early May, is, you know, do we have to do this? I mean, that's a question, right? Why am I managing fraud for states that just simply had very poor unemployment systems or got overrun? I shouldn't say poor, they're all overrun right now. And the issue at hand is what you're seeing here is these people are money mules. And in the world of the Bank Secrecy, Act, a money mule is assisting somebody that has a predicate offense already and now is becoming a criminal in and of themselves. Some people call them, your members are going to say, I'm a victim. Not really, that's not really what they are here. They're a victim of maybe a romance scam, but more so, they're now a criminal. And I know that's hard for a lot of credit unions, those primarily that are on today that says, hey, I'm in charge of member experience. I'm never going to tell my member they're a criminal. Well, I'm in charge of risk management. When I get on the phone with that member, I'm going to tell them that the Secret Service is going to be on their butt in about a week. So, and for those of you who haven't seen the advice from the Secret Service that came out last Thursday on your FinCEN site, they're absolutely asking you to reach out to them. Even if the member took partial funds, I think now they have systems where you can get a return. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but I'm going to let Keegan go on right now.
A couple other things, Jim, I want to mention to answer a couple of the questions that sort of came in that allude to the fact that how do I know that I might have a member that's involved here? In some of these cases, correct me if I'm wrong, we found where members received multiple deposits on either the same day or on multiple days. There might be some aggressive dollar amounts. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and from 2 different states. Or they'll receive it on, we've seen up to $28,000 at one point, and it actually was coming in from the state of Massachusetts and the state of Washington all at one time, in all different names. We saw one this morning, 3 of them that came in, all 3 were different names other than the member. So yeah, and then the other thing you have to understand is when Keegan says we went back 60 days, well, we really didn't know this was happening until around the 15th of May. Keegan's going to introduce you to some pretty neat stuff as it relates to exceptions, because if you did see one of these come through and unfortunately the member got the money and sent it to Nigeria, that ACH record is still out there. And they do get more if they, oh, you got it and you got rid of the money. And I'm going to turn it over to Keegan to kind of give you an idea of what that might look like.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And Chris from Northern Colorado actually just led us into this conversation with the question related to Tool 989, which is our ACH distribution maintenance tool. This particular tool, once that record is established, so when we talk about a record being established, we talk about the ACH record. The ACH record in CU Base is meant to be saved because we want to provide your members with the best experience possible. So what that means is that when an employer pays a member of yours, we save that, the ACH record. The 2 key fields for that ACH record are the company ID and the depositor ID. So once that is established, you now have the ability to review the information associated with those records. So if you said, I just want to search to see who has a record for any one of the affected or listed company IDs in the alert, I can search for that information here. Now, please be very clear that I'm in our test credit union here. You will not see 2 items. You will see every single company that your members have interacted with in this screen. We just happen to be showing you test data to obviously protect your members' data. But I can search for that company ID and I can find everybody associated with it. Once I find that company ID, I can choose distribution maintenance. This will show me every single member where those records are established and the last time they received a transaction for that particular company ID. So it's very important for you guys to see this information. Now, one of the cool things that you can do on the screen, if you haven't been made aware already, is I can see the member name, and I can quickly choose with the alternate view in the lower left-hand corner to see the ACH member name. So if you just wanted to go out to the company IDs that have been listed in that alert and identify what that information is, you have the ability to do so. I will mention that if you are reviewing your ACH reports on a daily basis, which I hope you are, there's also a new company report where you can start to review that information. For those of you who are familiar with the call letters or the letters associated with our reporting schema, the PACH D3 is the name of the report that you'll want to be reviewing. That will have the ability for you to review all new companies that have been established within your organization that may have bypassed the warehouse altogether. So I find it very important to not only review the warehouse data, but also the data that has bypassed that warehouse data altogether. Because these criminals and these people who are performing this business have been very smart, like Jim said, and they're using actual account number strings that don't ever hit your exceptions. I'm certain that some have hit your exceptions, but Jim and most of the ones that I have seen, they've been using valid strings of account number data that passes the warehouse altogether.
90%.
So it's very important that in addition to the warehouse, we are reviewing those items to make sure that we have the appropriate information. Now, if they do happen to appear on your exceptions, we have a similar toggle there as well. So here I am looking at exceptions. Here's the ACH name. I can display the member name in the lower left-hand corner. Again, we're in our test credit union here. So looking at this information here, we don't have any account numbers listed here, but obviously if I did, I would be able to toggle between that ACH name and member name. So all of that information, while you're processing your ACH, while you're working your exceptions, while you're doing your due diligence on the company IDs that have been listed, you have the ability to review that information accordingly. Jim,
So,
any thoughts on
Keegan,
the ACH data there?
no, so Keegan, when we're looking at that and we don't want the member to get any more money from that same ID, that same state, why don't you show the credit unions what you can do to stop at the member level, not the credit union level, but at the member level?
Sure. Couple of things. So at the member level, we're going to pretend that AT&T here is the Washington State Unemployment Company ID. I click on that and I choose distribution maintenance. This will list all of the people or records where I've received a deposit. And I'm going to answer the question here that just came in from Tanya. What happens if there's a last ACH tran date of all zeros? That means that the record has been established, maybe a pre-note has been received or something along those lines, and a deposit or withdrawal has not come through. So this last ACH tran date being all zeros means that the record has been established, but you need to, but no items have technically been posted for that record. If I wanted to prevent somebody from having the ability to receive a deposit here, I could simply choose update and I'll be brought to what I call my distribution maintenance screen. This is where you would see all of the distributions, loan payments, transfers that a member has set up. But you also have the ability to change that base deposit, and you can change this distribution type to any one of the variables that you see listed here, such as payment stopped, authorization revoked by customer. Any one of these variables can be used for you to review. So I can prevent any of the items from being posted using any one of these pieces of information that we have within the distribution type. That will ensure that any future deposits that come in with that company ID and depositor ID are not going to hit the member's account automatically, and they will appear as an exception for you to review and process.
So this is the number one, this is the first thing that you do, or the second thing that you do after you've caught one of these accounts, is stop it from happening again, because what we are seeing is it happens again. So you might as well,
You've even seen people freeze the accounts, right, Jim?
Oh yeah, more and more so what I'm hearing, at least the reach out that I had, Keegan, with the CFO group that you're involved in, is do we even keep these accounts open? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's the other thing.
yeah, I think that's the main consideration. My answer is hell no, but each credit union operates with its own philosophy on that. But regardless, if you're not going to close the account, at least stop things from happening in the future.
Sure. And that can be done via a freeze. That can be done looking at these individual ACH records. You can close the account. I mean, there's a number of ways that we can prevent these deposits from happening again. And I think the credit union employee needs to make the best decision based upon their research as to what makes the most sense.
Agreed.
Now, in addition to that, while we're in CU Base here, Jim, I want to talk a little bit. So we talked about ACH data. We talked about how you can be very clear on reviewing that information. But I also want to talk about how we can collect this information and flag these sort of deposits or fraudulent activities for future use. For those of you who do not know, roughly within the last 12 to 18 months, we've introduced some new fraud tracking capabilities within CU Base. Jim has created a great set of fraud incident types that we can use throughout the network. We can send this out or we can share this with any of you, but this is essentially a list of fraud types that we've seen throughout the network that we think would be valuable for you to review. And the two that we've added recently are the unemployment scam member withdrew and unemployment fraud return. So I think it's very important for you guys to take a look at what you are tracking from a fraudulent perspective so that we can have our post-mortem analysis opportunities on this information. Jim and I would be happy to set up a time to discuss this fraud toolkit with you. If you'd like to dive in with your credit union individually, we'd be happy to do so. And we can talk about what that looks like. Anything specific you want to mention related to the fraud toolkit here, Jim?
No, and there is a group of credit unions that Keegan and I are meeting with every quarter as it relates to getting this database populated. And I think we've met for the last 3 quarters, and that group seems to be growing, as a matter of fact. Many of them are the RK Go Big, the credit unions out in the PA and the East Coast area. We've got other credit unions that are jumping on board. And the reason that whole group is morphing, because it started as, okay, let's make sure that everybody's configured the same. Why did Keegan and I want to do that? Well, because in 12 to 18 months, we want to look back and go, what's the most prevalent fraud? And then, as Keegan's going to show you, what type of fraud is it? How was it carried out? Can we create the programmatical tool set to say 98% of the time, that baby's fraud. Just don't let it happen at all, because that's where we're going. That's the future of CU Base as fraud management platform. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Keegan to show you what these things actually look like.
Sure. So once you have a fraud incident, and we only have one here, we created a fraud incident dashboard. This fraud incident dashboard is really defined, if I go into my select filters here, to look at the transaction date that you're referencing, fraud amount range, one specific account, one specific social security number, and even one specific fraud type, status, or branch. So this is the post-mortem analysis that you have available to you to identify where that fraud had occurred. Now, we only have one type here, but if I go ahead and click on Show Detail, it will show me all the information here. Now, what's cool here is that towards the bottom of the screen, number one, we could just view the raw data. So if you wanted to view the data of the individual, here's all the raw data associated with that fraud event. But what I get more excited about is the ability to take all of the members where this fraud has occurred and to run the common bonds analysis. What this allows you to do is to run 4 consistent tests on the members where fraud has occurred. And you can start to find common bonds or common traits associated with these members. What if you find that all these members where this fraud occurred had a credit score less than X? What if you found they all have an age greater than Y? What if you found out they have no loans whatsoever? You can start to develop what those traits are and coach your team on what those traits are so that they can be a little bit more aware of what to look for when they're monitoring for potential fraud.
So as Keegan, once this database gets filled, this is where I was talking about, because you're going to want to look back and go, it was COVID. Everybody, every state in the union. Well, what states in the union? What states in the union were your members interacting with and getting money in a fraudulent way? How much of this actually came from Arizona, from Washington? Man, you know, this credit union saved the state of Washington over $350,000. Or the Nigerians got over $350,000 through our credit union. As Julie alluded to very early on, there is a bit of reputational risk here. Now, we do not believe there's going to be reclamation from the state to you. There's going to be reclamation from the state to your member, and probably more specifically from the Secret Service to your member to the state. I think you're pretty much out of it, other than having to come up with the data that the Secret Service is looking for. So, you know, as Keegan said, building this database has never been more important. You know, and you know us. We want you to utilize the platform in some ways for not a self-serving, but think of us all as kind of self-serving, to say the more of this we all know, the more that we can circulate and disseminate what we're seeing to the rest of the co-op to try to save them as much as possible that it's coming. Because, and so really, Keegan, and I think you're of the same mindset, we want to keep these configs the same from one credit union to the next.
It would allow us to run network-wide approaches for data analysis. We would prefer that, but obviously the toolkit allows for customization at the credit union level. So network approach-wise, obviously I love consistency, but I can appreciate if a credit union wants to dive off and do their own thing.
So with that said, lots of questions. I literally, this is all probably that Marvin, Keegan, and I mean, I watched Keegan last Friday. I think he spent the majority of the afternoon copying the queries over to credit unions. Astris Intelligence isn't charging you anything for this, so
nope.
Please reach out to Keegan. Things that we're learning. You know, like Keegan, you know, updating the query for the state and seeing other data elements in there. We are also seeing where you're not the first stop. What do I mean by that? So in the world of BSA, it's called layering, which means divorcing the predicate offense and the money earned from it as far from the origin as you possibly can. So why am I saying this? Because we're starting to see deposits come in on Square, PayPal. So your member isn't the first. There was other bank customer or member at another credit union that transferred it to your member account, and now the Nigerians have contacted your member to get the money out of your credit union. So you're the one where it's getting lifted from, but you weren't the first stop. And I think you're going to see more and more and more of that. So your bank secrecy officers should be very, you know, the anomalous payment systems out there, PayPal, Robinhood, Venmo, whatever else, when they start seeing these large amounts leaving in cash, you can't make the determination that there's a predicate offense. You can if it's coming in from the state and the members are moving the money. But now you're kind of in limbo. I don't even know if I'd file a SAR, to be honest with you. But at least put a high risk rating on that individual's account and keep an eye on them. If you are not using the due diligence codes, now's the time to start. Keegan, would you mind going to, I think, is it 262, 247?
Keegan, while you're doing that, you know, Diane asked a great question of really, how do we start talking to members? What are we allowed to tell the members? Should we tell them that maybe the Secret Service might be knocking at their door? What do we tell members, and how would we go about doing that?
That's
what
what
I
Jim would
said
do,
in
right,
that
Jim?
original alert was make sure your attorney has your back prior to picking up the phone, because there's kind of a quandary here. as a bank secrecy officer, risk manager, you're always told that if you file a SAR, you can't tell the member anything or talk to them. That's not necessarily true, because was the member interviewed is a box on the SAR. You just don't tell them that you're turning them over to law enforcement. But a lot of credit unions are making the phone calls. They're asking them, why are you getting this money? And it's the same. It's my girlfriend's. It's my girlfriend who lives in Istanbul. Many of them are romance scams, and it's not just the elderly anymore. Apparently the Nigerians have gotten into the 20-somethings back pocket now on, I live in a different country. I'm sending you some money so you can come over, and I don't, all the rest of it. So I think the majority of our credit unions are talking to members. Now, do I believe the majority of our credit unions are telling them, do you know you're a criminal? And could you please Google Money Mule? Probably not, but I have heard some credit unions say that the state of Washington is going to want this money back. Now, it's interesting because the member's not seeing where the money's coming from, right? They're not seeing that it's not in their name. They're just seeing that a pile of money ended up in their account and they came into the credit union by instruction. Now, here's the other thing that's happening. 90% of the time or greater, they've also given up their credentials and their account number for home banking. So believe it, they are. That's the second thing to do for you on your list, is turn off home banking for these individuals. Don't ever give it back. Or potentially let them know that now their account is compromised, and really the chances of something hitting it again. And that's what I was saying before. I was conversing with the CFO group, and primarily Sherry from Honor, saying, they're going to cost you money eventually. Reg E didn't apply this time. It didn't. But they just gave up their credentials. These fraudsters are going to do other things where the risk of loss falls on the credit union. So I think you all need to be having these conversations. The other thing is, if you review the IP addresses that are hitting this account, they stick out like a sore thumb. And here's the reason. They're waiting, and these are Nigerians, from Nigeria. As a matter of fact, one of them called one of our credit unions while the member who was in the office of the credit union staff, and they were explaining to them what was happening, called the credit union wanting to talk to this person, saying, why aren't you giving them the money? I'm not lying. Why aren't you giving them the money? These people are bold and smart. They sit on their laptops and they're waiting for that ACH to hit. The minute that it hits, they get on the phone, run to the credit union. Your first set of eyes on this are your tellers. Your first set of eyes. Your second set of eyes are the people in back office that are effectuating wires. The third set of eyes are those individuals who are watching the Payveris PayWatch system to make sure that a large amount of P2Ps aren't occurring. You got 3 sets of eyes on this, plus compliance and fraud management, 5 sets of eyes. Where the hell are you going to find all the time? I don't know. I've had those calls too. So long answer to a short question, but the reality is most credit unions are talking. But here's the answer you're going to get. It's my girlfriend. She now lives with me. I married her, and she never changed her name. First name's the same. It is it? You know what? Why don't you have her come into the credit union and get the money? I'm going to need to see her ID. Believe nothing. Nothing. It's my mom. She just moved from Washington State. Can I get her on the phone with you? No. Send your mom in. You really need to be extremely... Now, a lot of credit unions are finding when they're calling these members, they are telling them the truth. And there are valid reasons for it. So always check the joint owners on the accounts. before you just blatantly return this. Almost every, and when you start to take a look at natural rules as well, protect yourself from that, because NACHA says don't pay attention to the name, yet you're calling the member, you want to return it because the name's wrong. So make sure you're playing this right and document everything that you're doing.
One thing, Jim, that I would like to do, if you don't mind a second, Danielle O'Connor from Extend happens to be on the call, and Extend being one of our great partners who is seeing ACH data day in and day out as they are processing exceptions. I'd love to hear from Danielle if she has a few comments or suggestions on what Extend has been doing and how they could possibly help out credit unions if they said, wow, I'd really like to learn more about Extend's exception processing services. Danielle, would you mind providing a few comments there?
Definitely, not a problem. Hi, everyone. So a little bit about what Extend's seeing is that we work the ACH exceptions and PACSU. So we're like seeing this as a whole. And what we are looking for is those companies that are coming through and making sure that our credit unions that we're doing work for are aware of those exceptions that are coming through. We currently do not use the ACH reject codes such as the stop pays or the frozens, only because we want to make sure that the transaction is kicking out properly and we don't accidentally return those as an incorrect code, just so we know that you don't get hit with those ACH audit information items. So what we're doing is suspending those items, but you can use however which way to get it kicked out as well. So we're making sure that the credit union is aware of those transactions that are kicking out to the exceptions and helping the credit union get those returned. We are returning them as R03 when they do come in as an invalid and they're in the 48-hour window. If there is another code that you would like, that the credit unions would like to return them, we've been having the credit union reach out to us and we've been assisting with that. Keep in mind that you should not be using R23 as the member has not given you permission to return that. R17 has been that code for us to do, but our system currently does not provide the data to use that on CU base, but we do have the option to get that done. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to reach out to myself.
So it's interesting. I'm looking through the chats and the romance scams. Is there any similarities between them? There are. And what you also have to understand is these romance scams didn't start last week. They didn't start the beginning of May. They've been nurturing these relationships in anticipation of what's been going on. They knew they were going to use these relationships for a reason. So in some cases, these romance scams have been going on for 3, 4, 5, who knows, months. So the member has been told, when you call the credit union, or if the credit union calls you, they're going to tell you it's a scam. They're going to ask you these questions, and these are the answers you need to provide to get the money out of the credit union. So it's a well-orchestrated event that you're walking into. Don't think that, the member hasn't been counseled. Don't think that, well, chances are the member knows what the hell's going on, and they just want the free money because this is manna from heaven. So, and I do believe you're going to see more of this occurring and then leaving through other channels, because eventually they're going to go, oh, man, they've got us. They know who we are. They know it's about cash. They know it's about this. Instead, they're going to say, member, don't you have a debit card? Let's do a little activity on the debit card. Now, cash is king. They're going to stay with that. But I thought that's interesting. You know what? I would say that it was the people that are older. The CFPB said elderly exploitation is greatest at the age of 70 and above. That's not holding true anymore. They're getting to our kids, and they're getting to kids, by the way. There's activity that's occurring through minor accounts as well, and they're getting the money through that. So keep an eye on your kids and making sure you can educate them. So I wanted to make sure I answered that.
Jim and Keegan, there was another question. I'm not certain that was addressed, and it is about view-only modes for P2P and A2A and It's Me. Is that possible?
So there's a couple of things that I'll mention related to that specific comment for view-only access, or maybe taking away certain services from a member in the online space, which I believe is where the question is at. For those of you who haven't researched the PIB, or Personal Internet Branch Toolkit, for your members who are using online and mobile banking, I would encourage you to do so. I would say it is a very powerful tool, very much underutilized in our network, but one that is very powerful and can provide you, the credit union, the ability to maybe customize a member's experience in the online and mobile space, but also allow your members to customize their own space. We first created PIB because Randy was in a lobby at one time and he heard a elderly individual say, well, why did somebody log into my account when I was sleeping? My branch wasn't open. And this whole idea of personal internet branch and how I control my online and mobile experience is what that is all about. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at PIB and see how that can have an impact on your credit union in the future. Jim, any comments on that?
Absolutely. And the alert structures that are set up in there, the maximum, the minimums, we're all getting tasked by our regulators and by, the Secret Service, like we're the cops. We're not. One of the things that you can do is extend your fraud management program to your member. They become a fraud manager in and of themselves when you start giving them all of these additional tools to say, watch for this. Let the system do this. I don't want the system to do that. So Keegan, could you just go to the Audi CC real quick? I just want to show them how to use the.
You just want to look at the raw data table?
No, I just want to show them how to use that canned query in the Audi CC. Yeah. So it's tool number 565. I told you about home banking. So what you would, there's nothing there, but
yeah, this is the test credit union.
Yeah, back up once. If you had in that second row, you would just put and then account base equal to, and then account number and hit enter, and you'll show all the IPs that have logged on forever. I don't think we purged this file, but if by chance the Secret Service says, did they get into the home banking, you'll see it. It sticks out like a sore thumb. Most people only hit home banking with 3 IPs: their cell phone, their work PC, and maybe their home PC, and maybe a tablet. But from the most part, you don't see wacky IPs coming from all over the place. Now, yeah, if they play around at, the local coffee shop and they're constantly coming in through that, you might see that. But it gets pretty interesting.
Yeah, the other one I throw in there, Jim, anytime I talk about that canned query for Audi CC, just to learn a little bit about members, is tool 505, which is looking at, is there any suspicious resets or changes happening with a member's password? So I do find this to be valuable as well, which can be filtered by account base to see if you see anything fishy going on there.
Excellent. We did record the session today because we've used up almost all the time. Is there any other questions before Keegan and I let you go and Julie lets you go today?
There's some individual follow-ups that we'll have. We'll need to save these questions.
Yes.
The last comment there, we didn't dive into it very much, but the configure due diligence codes, tool 247 here. If we go into this particular tool, this is where you have the ability to define those due diligence codes that you have the ability to attach to any member account if you deem necessary.
And then you can run all the due diligence analytics over those individuals in the future.
You got it.
This for Utah State is Camel. I see the one for Utah. I'll make sure that I disseminate that to everybody.
Yep. Jim or Keegan, where would the credit union find PIB?
Well, finding PIB, there's a couple of different things. So first of all, I don't even know if I have access in my test credit union here. I don't. I might have to go out to my other test credit union. There's a couple of things to consider. One is there's work that needs to be done when you start thinking about PIB because this impacts members. So if you would like to go through a demo of what PIB is, please reach out to me, kdaniel@cuanswers.com, and we can absolutely talk about it. But it boils down to deciding, do I wish to activate a personal internet branch profile? Do I have a credit union default profile? And what does it look like? So within your VMS configuration, you have the ability to decide and define what those default profiles are. You then have the ability to flood that out to all members, and then you also have the ability to allow members to individually adjust their profiles. The largest challenge associated with PIB is that it is a separate site altogether that your members would need to be trained on how to use. So those support calls might increase when you launch the PIB toolkit. So that's why when you go down the PIB route, and I thank Karma for her comment in the comments here, they had a PIB expert at every single branch for staff and members, which is a great idea. So appreciate that comment, Karma, because PIB is going to cause more support calls as members dive into the toolkit.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it around a holiday.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you. Any other questions today? Quarterly fraud meetings, Jim, I think you had mentioned. How does a credit union join?
Keegan's the owner of that list. Just simply reach out to Keegan. He's the one who keeps it all updated and keeps us all in communication. So just send Keegan an email and he'd be happy to add you to the next list. We just had one, so I wouldn't expect another one till late June, early July.
Yeah, I don't even think we have one scheduled right now, so we can schedule it and we'll get something on the calendar for everybody. I'll just check.
So people should email Keegan.
Yes.
Yep, that's fine, and then we'll add you to the list.
Great. Jim and Keegan and Danielle O'Connor, if you wouldn't mind shooting out your contact information, maybe in the chat, and then just to reiterate so folks have it before we hang up the line today. And any further questions can be directed toward Jim and Keegan. We would certainly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will stick around for a few minutes. If there's any other questions you want to have, just run something by Jim, Keegan, or Danielle, that would be terrific. We're happy to hear from you, and we're here to help. So in any way that we can. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We had over 112 participants in today's conversation. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your experiences and your questions. We most certainly appreciate you.